So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then, we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we study then Yeshayahu the prophet and returning of the holy cities as per the instructions, you find then during this time of the restoration period, many news are coming very quickly, and then we can becoming more and more amazing are then the instructions, because it is absolutely true. Let's then make an evaluation of what's going on then as far as Daniel the 11th chapter. Very recently, we are then in the month of July of the year 14. Let's then understand Daniel the 11th chapter and then understand what it means then the despised one. We are speaking of the United States. Let's then understand why this then is taking place. Germany found spies of the United States spying around, and they were involved with the German government, and they ended up being found. These are then the startings of the rejection of the United States. Let's then understand these as a factor, because this was explained before. Daniel the 11th chapter is 100% pertaining to this time of the restoration period, and then as we read you can understand why. Great Britain, a couple of 100 years ago or so, was also rejected, then became the second beast of Revelation. The first was then obviously related with an area of Europe, and then the second was then on land, then giving us the understanding of the new world. It's not new, it's only the second portion of the beast out of the 1,000. As the United States is becoming more and more rejected, let's then understand what the other side then is making up for it. The Soviet Union is returning. As we read then the Gentile Netzer on the 11th chapter of Daniel, you find then the socialist countries becoming more and more prominent. The word socialist at this time of the restoration period gives us then discipline of work and discipline of expenses. There are many socialist countries, and they are very bad, and some of them are extremely defective as far as we can understand as economy. They steal, they cheat, and they lie. But then, as we understand during this time of the restoration period, we are then reading Daniel and the system that Daniel adopted during his time. The world is then understanding the perfection of the works of the Creator himself. Because of this, let's study further what then the Soviet Union is doing. Very recently, the leader of the Soviet Union went to Cuba. You find this information in the British newspaper, and these you find very plainly. They are going to construct 4 major thermoelectric power stations, and then each of them a couple of 100 MWs, very big power stations, and they then obviously forgave Cuba of more than 90% of the debts because of the previous movement of the socialist group. As we understand Daniel the 11th chapter, explaining then the condition of the Soviet Union at this time must become greater than the former. And then Cuba is receiving then obviously the benefits of these friendship and these understanding. But then it doesn't stop there. As we read the instructions, you find then other countries being involved, and the BRICS nations are visiting in Brazil. It is starting very early this month, many preparations for this event. And as the World Cup has ended for Brazil, the country of Brazil is bankrupt. Unfortunately, the numbers are shown, and the country is truly done away with. What Luiz Inácio has done for 8 years, this present government, the existing government, has squandered. And the nation is so much trouble that the nation does not have enough money from its own sources. And they had to get this money lended to get the refinery in the north, then lended from a bank. It takes more than 220 times 12 digits to get the debt of the petroleum, the state-owned petroleum company. And then, not only this, other countries, says involvement with the petroleum in this country, are also leaving the country. The Brazilian government tries to treat these foreign companies, petroleum companies, as if they were dealing with their own state-owned bankrupt company. The other countries had enough of it. It's nonsense. Brazil does not know how to manage, and truly it is bankrupt. But let's then read these, because as we understand the destruction of the government of a nation, a lot of it is related with the lack of control of self. A person, when can't control the desires of the body, always destroys. Let's then be very clear. As we understand this factor, as it was explained before of the despised one, as we understand before, many times it was explained these prophecies of Yirmiyahu and Daniel. You find then China leading, you find then the northern kingdom becoming more and more prominent, you find then the southern kingdom become even more prominent because they have a huge workforce. Their people are very young, and they are going to be very important in the future. Not only this, but then let's try to understand why we should read and understand and spend time reading the instructions. Let's then understand what's going on with sex in the country. In Brazil, it is absolutely rampant. They are mounting like rats. But let's then understand what 1 Corinthians explains in the 7th chapter. Shaliach Shaul was then involved on giving the word, or the completion of the spring feast, and then his people were gathering around. Let's be very clear. He said in the 7th chapter, 7th verse, "For I desire that every man be like myself in purity, but every man is endowed with his understanding, function, from Elohim. One does one way, other the other." What he's explaining are then the functions. 7 spirits of Elohim, 7 functions. Then he said, "And I say to them who have wives and to widows, that it is advantageous to them to remain as himself." Let's understand what sex is as far as the holy instructions. So let's plain in very straightforward. Let's give this piece of information. Sex should be exercised only when you are going to have children. It's the only time. The rest of it should be exercised self-control and obedience to the holy instructions, and then guiding other people. Let's understand what Shaliach Shaul was saying. He expects that each man have his wife and each wife have a husband. Understandable. Let's then understand also why the Messiah said as far as the cares of the world. When a couple joins, the Savior himself said they are involved with the cares of the world because they're no longer interested in the holy instructions and then guiding other people. They are concerned with having a nice home, then they want to have a nice family, they want to have the pleasures in life, they want to have more money, they want more influence, and more pleasures and more pleasures and more pleasures, and then at the end they are caught unawares. That's then Luke chapter 1:7. So what the Messiah is saying is this: though they gather and these people, they get in a relationship, they are unaware of the importance of the holy instructions and tabernacling. They can't exercise self-control and discipline as far as tabernacling is concerned. So then, what was Shaliach Shaul then saying? As he was then explaining the completion of the spring feast, some of his people were involved with the Gentiles. So Shaliach Shaul was saying simply, don't deprive from having a family, but be aware of the cares of this world. That's why the Messiah said you can't serve both of them. Either you serve money and pleasure, or you serve tabernacling. Sex is only for having a family. There is no other purpose for it. Some people, they think only because they have a family they are absolutely at liberty to do however and whatsoever they want. They think oral sex is okay. They think having sex every time is okay. No, it's not. It is absolutely disgusting. The Holy Creator expects his people to be absolutely disciplined because this world is extremely contaminated. That's why then he made in a certain way, so then when the people are ready for a family, that's the only time they do it. Placing strange items in one's body, it is prohibited. Changing sex is prohibited. Sex outside of having a family is prohibited. But then let's understand what Solomon said regarding the Song of Solomon. Let me say this: God himself did not guide Solomon or Solomon as far as the treatment of husband and wife. Let me say this very clear. God did not direct him to write those words. He did on his own. Let's read what then Solomon did. He had then 700 wives. Let me ask you this. The Messiah, the Savior, said, and God made male and female. When they join and they have a family, let them be one. Do you think the Creator would speak with a person with 700? The only situation involved with Solomon was because he was the king. He wrote into law what he thought was proper, but he himself didn't do it. So then, there are lots of preachers who make their own names when they write regarding Solomon. He was a scoundrel beyond measure. And some of those wives were very wicked, from foreign countries. So let's be very clear. When the Creator made male and female was precisely as the Savior explained. And God made them female and also male, and they joined them together so then they would have a family. This was and is and shall be the purpose. Now let me ask you this. How many of the people can understand this factor and only having sex for having kids? They can't control themselves. They want to act like animals, and they become unfruitful. As we read these, we come to the conclusion that what the Messiah said was true. Now, as we read the situation, and this topic out of control destroys a nation. Much work was done in this country for 8 years, and shortly 4 years it was squandered. So then, understandably, churches are always involved with some sort of behavioral list. Some of those places you go there and you are then burning with desire, then you have to have a wife or husband. You know the situation, these becoming worst. When people go to church, they tend to have these, what's the name, those blinders of horses, behavioral lists. Now you have to have a job, understandable. You have to have then means of sustaining your own family, understandable. But then if a person is burning with desire, having a wife or a husband is the worst thing you can ever imagine, because they were not educated regarding the holy instructions. Worst yet, they get translation from the Greco and the Romans, and then lately it was investigated what the Catholic Church was done, and they found those people involved with the Vatican Bank, they were thieves, and the Pope himself removed those scoundrels from power, and then they were replaced. So church truly is a farce. They don't understand the holy instructions. They twist the instructions. They only have a straightforward answer if it is convenient. And people get self-proclaimed. Many people without the holy instructions in tabernacling, they think they are separated and they are absolutely the chosen of God. God doesn't care two rips of they think of themselves. He already spent a lot regarding his son and what his son had to go through, so then people would understand tabernacling as per instructions of Moses. As Moses taught, those laws remained holy. They trained in the desert. He came and then he had taken the place of his father, so then the Gentiles would have a chance of reading and understanding the holy instructions and would save their own souls. That's what it was, and is, and shall be. Now, for some people, understandably, when you say you should only have sex when you have kids, some people, they get absolutely crazy, because they absolutely have no self-control. Since churches are a farce, they don't understand what the holy instructions are teaching, Then they proclaim with their own teachers. That's why you find gifts, because they always try to please each other. Try to understand it. Not understanding the holy instructions is pleasing each other, gifting each other. As the Greco and the Roman translation is a piece of junk, then as you read, people simply get crazy. So then, many news are very evident as far as the holy instructions. You find then the kingdom of the north very prominent. You find then nations that once were prominent became bankrupt. You find then the relationship with husbands and wives the way it should be. And there is another point we should demystify very simply and plainly. And this truly relates with the time where then the mule spoke. There is in the previous chapters, you find then at some point there was a mule that spoke, and then the instructions taught us, and God spoke through a donkey. Let me say this to you: the Holy Creator does not speak through animals. God did not speak through the mule or a donkey. It was a familiar spirit, a demonic spirit, that spoke through the animal. So let's understand what it means: human spirits and then demonic spirits versus what the Holy Creator means. As we also understand, there are people who have claims that they have conversed with angels. Now they are simply crazy. So as we read, as we understand, the new system is coming very shortly. From 12 to 24 months, the BRICS Bank is going to be available. And more nations want to become part of it. That's great news. The bid for investing in this new system was opened, and they are obviously considering other countries becoming part of it. Argentina is very interested in becoming part of it. So the new system is becoming very famous, as then obviously Daniel already taught us from centuries ago. So then, as we then in quote march on regarding the holy instructions in Daniel the 11th chapter, we are yet in 11:4, and Mr. Kabila, Mr. Shi, they make further advancement. Then we find Daniel 11:5, because then we understand woe to the land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, regarding then the Congo. Why Congo? Because it's very rich in minerals. They have coltan, extremely important for the electronic industry. Now, some people, they are so religious, they are religious nerds, and they don't study economies of other nations. They don't study, for instance, what those people have their cultures invested with. They have only this crazy idea: they live as they want, and as they die they are going to heaven, rather than having coming to the earth, as per Zechariah. But then shouldn't be surprised, the Greco and the Roman translation is very defective. That's why their own churches are then stealing. So then, next time we're going to observe more of these 1 Corinthians and what then Shaliach Shaul said as far as the relationship of a man and a woman. But you already know what the plan of the Creator is. Now, should we love Him more? Should we study more? Should we want to be in His path? That's for every person to decide. However, your soul then is on the line. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.